It is the Doomsday Podcast, and we are at our familiar perch, although a lot of times we haven't shown it to you in the past. It is our suite high above AT&T Stadium. Thank you to Jim and Sally Nation for the
I thought
use
you
of
had
the
a bigger
suite.
budget than I believed.
we They were wonderful. I came to see them during the game just because I needed to do something during the game because it got out of hand in a hurry. And Ed, I would just say, and Ed Werder, of course, you know him from TV over the years, but you mainly know him through the Doomsday Podcast. Ed, when we were last here, we were, and of course, because I skipped the preseason game, but when we were last here gathered together, we were talking about a Cowboys' embarrassing playoff loss to Green Bay. And generally, one of the things the Cowboys do, Ed, over the last couple of years is play extremely well at home.
Undefeated last year at home.
Undefeated last year.
Till the playoffs.
This year, at least, they've knocked their clunker out just, immediately. But I kept finding myself like asking after this game, are you having flashbacks? The Cowboys seem like they, as a unified front, wanted to suggest, no, we're not feeling flashbacks to Green Bay. But Ed, the total annihilation of this team that we witnessed, you couldn't help but think back to where we were in the postseason, and an embarrassing day, an embarrassing loss for the Cowboys.
Well, I think the thing that will trouble Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy the most is that they put a huge emphasis this offseason on improving their run defense. They thought hiring Mike Zimmer as a defensive coordinator and his familiarity with defending against this scheme that the 49ers have used, the Packers used, the two teams that have eliminated the Cowboys from the playoffs in the last 3 years, used the same offense the Saints use today. Clint Kubiak, their new offensive coordinator and play caller, came to New Orleans from San Francisco directly. He was on Zimmer's staff in Minnesota. And I think they were really curious, and I know from talking to McCarthy during the week, they were curious to see how they matched up against this scheme with their own, the changes they made in the offseason on defense, and there was none. The Saints not only scored on 6 straight possessions to open the game, they scored a touchdown on 6 straight possessions to open the game. Derek Carr was not pressured. The best pressure defense in football didn't have any effect on the quarterback in this game. And then the run defense was just atrocious. They had 190 yards rushing, 5 yards. Alvin Kamara rushed for 4 touchdowns. He had 6 once before against Zimmer, so he might leave disappointed because on Christmas Day in 2020, he had 6, tied the NFL record against Zimmer's defense. But McCarthy talked about it afterward, and we'll go into more detail. But one of the things he kept saying was they attacked our perimeter time and time and time again. And when you put that on tape, you're going to see it until you can stop it. And they appeared no better able to defend this scheme than they did last year. And you got the 49ers coming up in a couple weeks. And they have better personnel, and they've run the system for far longer than the Saints did.
Boy, it's just a demoralizing loss for the Cowboys. Well put. Kubiak, who I was just looking at somebody that was coaching for his dad back with the Texans in 2006, and then to see Clint Kubiak just completely, and then, after the game, and Ed, we'll talk more about it, but to hear Micah Parsons, generally after a loss, players like, they didn't do anything, we played poorly, la, 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 la. I like talking to him. I like hearing from him, but he was marveling at the coaching of Shanahan's,
Kyle
Shanahan,
Mike Shanahan's offense.
Yes, and then you talk about McVay, and I guess they spent some time together. Sean McVay, like we did at those joint practices, and to hear him talk, it was like, I'd love to play for this guy.
He did not mention Mike McCarthy among the play callers. He was citing for their exceptional.
It was like, we've got to be better. Our DC has to be better. I mean, he had some interesting things to say. He didn't exactly say it like that, but his point was, he tried to actually take up for Zim in the fact that he said our scheme was okay. It certainly didn't look like it in that game, but we got a lot to cover. Cowboys just get crushed, 44-19. We're really never in this game. Even with the great kicking of Aubrey, they were trying to kick their way back into the game. They couldn't get it done. Mike from Rogue Media Network, please play the music. All right, and there it is, Cowboys, the Doomsday Podcast, coming to you from high above AT&T Stadium, where Ed and I have just been talking to Jerry, talking to some of the players, listening to Dak Prescott. I think one thing they wanted known was that this is a whole different team. This is a whole different season. But you could have fooled me. You could have fooled me watching that team because it looked a lot like the defense in the team against the Packers from last year.
Well, I think in America's sports books, casinos, and sports talk shows, Dennis Allen, the head coach of the Saints, was viewed as the NFL head coach most likely to be the first fire this season. I just wonder how far Mike McCarthy may have advanced in those standings today. The Cowboys are first home game under Mike Zimmer, first appearance at Jerry World since the Green Bay playoff debacle. They tied the franchise record for the most points allowed in the first half in franchise history. The Saints scored on all 5 possessions, 4 drives of 70 or more yards, and the last of those 5 converting a short field after a Dak Prescott interception. To put that in perspective, that's 65 years of Cowboys football that they have not had a worse first half. That's 982 games they have not had a worse half. Not even Mike Nolan's 2020 defense that allowed the most points in Cowboys history, even his defense didn't give up 35 points in the first half of any game. The last time the Cowboys allowed 432 yards of offense and 44 yard points or more, as the Saints did on Sunday, was against the Cleveland Browns in 2020, the COVID year. I was trying to do a little research. You were asking me to come on up. I was downstairs, and I was trying to determine where this ranked in terms of home losses for Dak Prescott. 25-point home loss. They lost by 25 at Denver in 2017, and they lost by 32 at San Francisco last year. By my calculations, and I could be proven wrong, this appears to be the first time in the Dak Prescott era, the Cowboys have lost by 25 or more points at home, much less than a home opener.
Wow. 44-19. And I'm sorry I was rushing you, by the way. If I'd have known you were putting together things like that, I would have never asked you to come up.
I just left myself possibility of being wrong now. I don't think I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I looked at it pretty carefully. I'm not great at math. I'm not Tim Calishow when it comes to math.
Well, he's has some Rain Man characteristics. Okay, so I would say that Ed, we couldn't help but look back, and Olave early on has the big play. Kamara, we know these are big time players. Olave was at Ohio State, and he was taken in the first round, and you expect it. Rashid Shaheed shows up on the scene as an undrafted free agent out of Weber State, and a couple of years ago, and then last year he really kind of emerged as a threat. And then Ed, that was just I'm trying to think. I can't help but think back against Green Bay. I'm trying to think of other people over the years that it's happened against, where you just see receivers running wild all over the field. And there was something about the number he was wearing, like 22. I kept saying, "What is this guy? Is this guy a running back? Who is this guy?" And again, he emerged last year. He came from kind of nowhere in the NFL. He emerged as a threat last year, and today he was just a devastating threat. And Derek Carr, when given that much time, he's an much maligned quarterback over the years. He certainly had his moments, but you couldn't help but, that's what somebody wanted to ask me at halftime. They're like, "Hey, Matt, what does Derek Carr make?" Because you can't help but think everything in the context of the Cowboys quarterback just became the highest paid quarterback in the NFL at $60 million a year, the highest paid player. And you're like, okay, then I said, I don't know what Derek Carr makes. Maybe it's like, I don't know, 15, 20 million a year. He makes pretty good money, but not Dak money. And yet when he was given time, like you talk about, think about what we were talking about last week. It's like Zimmer's defense, 6 sacks, the takeaways, everything that was going on.
Great athleticism.
The tremendous.
Marvin and Overshawn.
And
the unstoppable pressure of Micah Parsons and the dual ability of DeMarcus Lawrence in the run game as a pass rusher. The 50 air yards on Derek Carr's touchdown pass to Shaheed in the first quarter. That's the deepest touchdown pass the Cowboys have allowed since 2012 by RG3, your man RG3.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you idolize him. But, it's not uncommon. I mean, Rashid Shaheed that was his sixth touchdown of 30 or more air yards. That's the most since the start of last year. Broke a tie with Tyreek Hill. And he has the 70-yard touchdown. He scored 11 touchdowns in his career, and the average distance of those 11 touchdowns is 51.4 yards. So you're talking about an elite deep receiver. Yeah. And, Carr got the throw out just before Odigizua hit him. They were in a too deep zone. Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker were both back there. They got split. That secondary coverage is supposed to prevent the big play, the too deep zone, and he runs
ran right through him.
Yeah, a perfectly placed ball by Derek Carr. But their inability to consistently generate pressure, they couldn't play the run. I think this scheme, really challenges your corners to come up and tackle, and you've got a rookie corner on one side, and Diggs on the other side is not known for his tackling ability. And they just got beat up front, I think, on both lines of scrimmage, offensively and defensively. And, I think how bad the defense was will obscure how entirely mediocre or non-competitive the offense was.
Well, good point. And there had to be a thought on offense, and Dak was asked about that they had to score every possession and save some field goals. They weren't able to do that. I did find it interesting that Dak, he said, I'm harder on myself than anybody. But I think the conclusion he came to after the game was like, I was okay. Like, I was pretty good. I'd like that one throwback because his first
if he reads the papers tomorrow or listens to us and other shows, he's probably going to find out there are some critics that are a little harsher than he is in his evaluation.
He was pretty okay with himself.
He had 2 picks, a fumble.
Yeah, I think he thought
they were in the red zone.
The first pick, the receiver kind of fell down, so I think he kind of absolved himself with that one.
Brooks,
the second one, the Honey Badger sat on. That was a really bad throw. It was ill-advised throw where it was. Of course, the excuse is always, well, we're coming back. We're already way down, so it's like for some reason those interceptions don't count. So but it really the defense was so horrible, the offense became almost irrelevant, and it was like. And they were doing it in such a quick fashion. It was like 2 plays, 3 plays, and then just a simple. I mean, Ed, think about that. Let's go back just a couple of those, and we just talked about one of them. But the Kamara screen,
the slip screen,
it's a middle screen,
untouched.
And it was like once
Untouched.
I think Kendricks, they blocked him up, and again they did a beautiful job of blocking. The Saints did, but they blocked, and it was like one dude got blocked. And it was like nobody else had a shot, and it was. I kept. There are a few games in the back of my head where there were like almost comical results, where the Cowboys were just chasing people all day. That come back to me. One was against Green Bay, of course, and then today against New Orleans. I had this thought. When we see New Orleans running roughshod, the Cowboys have had some success against New Orleans, and they've had some games where they just got overwhelmed. But we still associate them with Sean Payton, right? We Sean, because of who he was in that offense and everything, we always thought that's a high-powered group. Well, now that they're a couple of years removed from him, we don't think of them quite like that
yet. This is the first year they've moved on from that offensive system because they kept Pete Carmichael even after Drew Brees retired and after Sean left the Saints organization. So this is the first year of the new scheme, and they were really impressive on opening day. They blew out Carolina, and
we thought they were horrible.
Basically followed the same exact form. I mean, they scored on 9 straight possessions to start the season, and they scored a league high 47 points, and they won by 27 points, I think. And most people said, which was the biggest margin of victory by anybody in the league, and most people said, yeah, but Carolina's horrible. Like they're hapless. Well, they just did the same thing to the Cowboys, and we thought the Cowboys were pretty good. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're not good.
Yeah, I'm leaning toward the not good. Late at some point in the fourth quarter, I think they had to go to the locker room. Did you hear about this with the Saints? And find the punter. The punter had actually gone off the field. And
I saw you tweeted something about having to wake him up because, I mean, not only could they they couldn't force a punt because they couldn't even get him to third down. I think the Saints were like They only had 3 third downs in the whole first half, and they scored 35 points. And so the few times the Cowboys got him a third down, the Saints won third down and continued the drive. It was just I didn't think the Cowboys were capable on defense of playing like that.
And if you're
you're right. I mean, we don't see this. I thought the Saints would have to create a low-scoring game for them to win. They're like 9-1 when they hold the opponent to 20 or less. That's how they win usually. You don't usually win like this.
Yeah. I mean, they've given this guy, I thought to myself, think about what they have. Kamara, what's our man, Rashid Shaheed, so they have him. They have Olave. They have Taysom Hill.
But he doesn't produce a lot.
No, but I'm just saying they have gadget people. They have we just don't. We think of other teams having more weapons right now than New Orleans, and yet today this looked like the greatest show on turf.
Well, here it is from Elias Sports Bureau. The Saints have scored either a touchdown or a field goal on 16 of their 21 possessions this season at 76%. That's the highest rate by any team in its first 2 games of the season since at least the start of 1980.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And by the way, it's an embarrassing result for our man Zim in what you were mentioning earlier, that Clint Kubiak was on his staff. There's some familiarity there, and it just looked like he schemed them up so well. And it's what's really galling, I think, to Cowboys fans is that you have someone, and you and I were both over there talking to Micah Parsons and asking him some questions after the game. When you have that elite of a player, and of course, the TV broadcast, everybody's like, okay, let's watch Micah Parsons, one of the greatest players in the game. And he's that, he was irrelevant. He didn't,
he didn't impact the game at all.
No.
And I like what he said. The thing that struck me about what Micah Parsons said after the game was, I'm going to look at this tape and I want to see how hard guys were playing when we were down 21-3. I thought that was an interesting comment that he made. And Jerry Jones described himself as exceptionally disappointed for the fans, and said the only thing good about this is that it happened early in the season where you can still correct it. And it sounded to me like Mike McCarthy kind of diminished the significance of this loss, by 25 points at home, by telling the players basically the only thing that happened of consequence today is we're not going to go 17-0.
Yeah.
But they might worry about going 1-16. Because if they don't play better than this, that's going to be possible.
Yeah, and Dak brought that up, that, hey, no team in 50 years has gone undefeated, and he was echoing Mike McCarthy, and that's what Mike said, hey, we were going to lose, which honestly, to me, feels like a little bit of a loser mentality to immediately go in there and try to lessen the blow. Hey, guys, we weren't going to go undefeated. We knew we were going to lose a game.
I don't think that's how Parcells or Jimmy Johnson would have reacted to that kind of. Well, but McCarthy's been successful. We have to give him that. He has won 12 games here, 3 years in a row, never been done before. But, of course, they failed in the postseason, and that's why he doesn't have a contract extension, and that's why he can't afford too many of these kinds of performances.
Yeah.
Especially at home. And we've talked about the defense, but really, the offense has in 2 games not run the ball at all. Ezekiel Elliott didn't even start today. In fact, he didn't even get a touch until after Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn touched the ball. I don't think he came in until their second or third series. And then if you look at it overall, you have to question, well, how many playmakers do they have? Is this like the San Francisco playoff loss 2 years ago all over again? Once Tony Pollard went out with the injury. Dak's 4 of 18, that's 22% on throws of 15 or more yards in the air down the field. He's 2 of 9 in each game. He was one of the most accurate downfield throwers in the league last season, completing 54% of those kinds of throws, 15 yards or more down the field. That was tied for the 5th best in the NFL. He only had 1 game last year where he completed fewer than 25% of those kinds of throws. So maybe we should be a little troubled about that too.
Yeah, I'm troubled. About pretty much everything. Coming off.
Wait till you hear from Stretch.
Yeah,
we haven't even heard from Stretch.
I know. We're going to get there here in a second. I did want to tell everybody, Marable Homes. Thank you so much, Blake Marable. What a deal! What a deal! Amazing homes, Preston Hollow, Lake Highlands, the Highland Park area. Gorgeous, gorgeous homes, and they'll do it however you want. They're big. They're a lot like the house Ed lives in, but they'll come out to Flower Mound.
Which
In
one?
fact, Ed, yeah,
I'm
that's
kidding.
right. Ed's got one, maybe perhaps in Colorado, but there it is. It is amazing, and the people they hire, sometimes they sub people out, and you're like, who are these people? And they swear by all of them, and in fact, those people become part of the family. So very, very, we're fortunate to have Marable Homes back.
Well, you have to build big homes when your subcontractors are going to live with you because they're part of your family.
That's right. Yeah, subs. It's a little awkward when the subs are all in the same house with you, but anyway, it's an amazing place, and we appreciate them so much here on the Doomsday Podcast. And Ed, you brought him up, and so we might as well bring him in at this point. It is now time for and these are going to be harsh. The grading is going to be extremely harsh. I hope he doesn't go soft like McCarthy did. Well, Matt, we weren't going to win them all. Aren't going to go, but it is now time to hear stretch plays with Glenn Stretch Smith, former Cowboy scout and coach. Okay, it is time for stretch plays, and Glenn Stretch Smith, former Cowboys coach and scout. Stretch, the fans were already on Twitter wondering about your grades. I don't know if this is going to be a moment where you try to, to me, this is a day for harsh grades, but I'll leave this up to you. Stretch, the utter annihilation of Mike Zimmer's defense. We don't often see anything that one-sided. I mean, just overall, how surprised were you that New Orleans was just able to come out and just run roughshod over this defense, both through the air and the running game?
Well, I mean, I think initially, if you're honest with yourself and you understand defensively what Mike Zimmer is wanting to do, he is wanting and has wanted since the middle of training camp to get more bigger and physical bodies inside at defensive tackle. That's why they traded for Phillips. That's why they went and signed Linval Joseph. Mazi has not been able and was not able early in camp to hold the point. You know, you got Odigizua rolling in there, some Golston, but you've got, in order to really play what I would consider Shanahan zone running scheme, you've got to be able to handle the point of attack. Now, you combine that with the fact that they're trying to play Micah Parsons at 245 or 250 pounds as a defensive end, and you knew once Kubiak saw that, he was going to go at them from a run standpoint. They were going to try to run the football at a light defensive front, a light, especially defensive end. Now, last week you saw it worked well because you had two backup tackles, and I was surprised to see Micah go back out there as a defensive end with Mike Zimmer playing that same scheme this week. That's what they did. And so you saw an offensive group just go assault a defensive front with a run scheme that is a zone run scheme out of the Shanahan tree. That's exactly what you would see had they played San Francisco. That's exactly what you would see had they played anybody that's been in that zone run scheme. And then they play action off of it. Now you combine that with the fact that they're able to split and run a corner post. They split the cover two. Shaheed splits the safeties, and it's 14-0 before you could ever get settled into the game. And so I think they were chasing their the entire time. There are times, and I'll show it tonight on Channel 8. It's unfortunately can't show some highlights here, but I mean, I don't want to pick on Phillips, but I mean, literally got knocked 8 yards off of the football. And when you're getting knocked off the football like that, you have absolutely no chance defensively of stopping the run. Now, the other thing that they were able to do is they were able to catch Dallas in man coverage. They ran the motion to trips, which only left the tight end backside. Soon as he goes with the motion, as soon as Carson ran with the motion, they knew they had man coverage there. So that means Kendricks is man on man with the back. They call the inside screen, they hit it, and they're off to the races. And so it really was a situation today where Mike Zimmer completely got out schemed by his former coordinator, Kubiak, and where they got out physical by a New Orleans offensive line that was absolutely ready to play today. And when you saw that, and then you saw them turning the protections, they were max protecting some with the tight end and helping with Parsons. Hey, they were running deep overs. Everything they called today was absolutely perfect. And so if you're honest with yourself and you're honest with how you look at the film, you're honest with what scheme you're seeing and personnel you're seeing, you got completely outplayed today, and you can give the entire defense nothing but an F. And I'm saying that because it is difficult to watch when a team scores, and I'm not talking about field goals. I think they scored 5 or 6 straight touchdowns in the football game. And so you're out schemed, you're out physical, and you get your ass whipped. F. That's what you get, an F.
The F. This is the first F of the season. Of course, we're only in week 2. Cowboys fall to 1-1. Give our folks, since the focal point of this game was the defense getting overwhelmed. If and you've coached at the collegiate level and the NFL level, and I'm just curious, what do you think the play would have been? How would you have tried to get Micah going? Because for him to be, for arguably the best defensive player in the NFL, to basically be rendered irrelevant for most of the game, if not all of the game, what do you think Zimmer could have done or should have done to react to what he was seeing?
Well, and he tried to do that some. He tried to play some true 4 down linemen. He tried to switch up the personnel for what he was doing. The problem right now is now you've been exposed to this. Now, if you don't think that an 0-2 Baltimore team is not going to click this film on probably at some point this evening and see the fact that you just got physically handled, I mean, that's exactly what you're going to see. And so I know that I know the way I work with Mike. I know how he is. He'll go back in and he'll come up with a better schematical system to try to physically handle a 2 tight end run game and play action off of it. That's exactly what you're going to see with Lamar Jackson, and that's exactly what they're going to come in here and try to do, is give you a big dose of Derrick Henry and play action off of that. But when you look at the game that we just saw and you see a team absolutely get handled the way that the Cowboys got handled, and I think it's a really hard pill to swallow when you get beat that bad physically and when you get beat up like that up front. And I'm saying it was play after play, and it didn't matter whether they were running toss, outside zone, inside zone. It didn't matter. It was 6, 7, 8 yards a carry. And when you're doing that, you've got to do something. And I believe that Mike will, but I also am telling you that right now, the personnel, and it's only taken you 1 week into the season, the defensive front for the Cowboys has been exposed, because you saw what they tried to do when they went to trade for Phillips, when they signed Linval Joseph. They're really telling you we're not very good up front, and I think Mike knew that, and they got away with it week one. They didn't get away with it week two, and that's that's the oldest saying. I mean, sometimes you bite the bear, and sometimes the bear bites you, and unfortunately, that's what happened. I mean, the Cowboys got caught up in a fist fight, and they got their ass whipped on the defensive front.
All right. And by the way, with our new partners at Rogue Sports Media Network, Stretch, if there's ever a highlight we want or you want to see, you just say the word. I mean, they can do it. And we found some good partners there. So you just let us know what you need and we'll make it happen. Stretch, let's go over to the offensive side of the ball. I think there's inherently when you start letting one get away from you, there's the pressure to score on every possession. The first interception, I think the receiver basically fell down. The second one, Dak was trying to fit in there, and the Honey Badger was sitting on that route. What did you think of his play and just the overall play of the offense? In this kind of matchup, in this kind of beatdown, like you talked about, you can't kick field goals, and yet this team, the Cowboys, were forced to try to kick field goals instead of scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, they had a. You could tell that New Orleans was in a bend but don't break a situation a lot. I thought the game plan offensively was okay. Dallas tried to run the football, and they tried to get Deuce in the game. They were rolling the backs in there, and I think they were okay with that. I thought the offensive line did a decent job. I gave the offensive line a B. I thought receiver wise, Jordan Brooks, you can't fall down. You can't fall down in a situation where you're running a dig inside and Dak's putting the ball in a tight window throw and you stumble and the ball gets picked. You can't do that. But guess what else is the other side of that? That Cowboys fans better understand. Your quarterback just got $60 million. So you're going to have one $30 million receiver, and then you're going to have some guys. And you know what? You got to take the good and the bad with those guys. You don't have enough money to pay for any more frontline receivers. And so some of these younger kids are going to have to step up and make some plays. And when you're in that situation, you can't stumble and fall in there. That's the window of an NFL throw. And so you don't have the ability to go stumble in there. The second throw, he tried to press into the seam. The poor throw. He shouldn't have thrown the football, but he's trying to make something happen, knowing he's watching the same football game we're watching. He's watching his defense get knocked off the ball. So it's hard to be real critical of Dak. He made a poor throw on that seam ball, and it was intercepted by Tyrann Mathieu. I thought Dak got a C. The receivers were saved with a B because CD makes a big play on the sail route, jumps out of contact, and goes and scores with it. So offensively, it's not like the game plan was terrible. It was just you were playing from behind the entire day, and that's a terrible situation to be in offensively. Mike Zimmer knows that he put his offense in a bad situation and in a bad way. And so overall, the Dallas defense was, I thought, very average today, and in some places a little above average. But you can't be average and not putting the ball in the end zone when your defense is, getting scored on like a damn pinball machine. So it's a tough situation to be in.
Yeah, and Guyton, you saw, got called for a hold. We had another look at that play, and he certainly did grab the defensive end coming around the edge there at the last minute, and had him pretty firm. So it looked like a fair call there. But yeah, the offense. I wonder, Stretch, you're always good at kind of understanding how. And in fact, you coached tight ends in college at Northern Illinois, and also coached the position there at OU. When you're missing your front line tight end, Ferguson, how much does it take away from you in far as what they're trying to do in all facets of the game?
Well, I mean, I thought Shoemaker stepped in and did a really nice job. I mean, he made a few nice catches, and I thought, I thought that was good. Anytime you're missing though your frontline tight end, it, what it causes you to kind of get away from a personnel grouping and 12 personnel that you're not at your best, and so not a not I'm sure that the Cowboys were thinking that or hoping that they could get, they would get him back and hoping he'll get back next week. But ultimately, I thought Shoemaker did a decent job. He's physical at the line. I mean, you saw span forward late in the game. And yeah, anytime you're running those inside, zones where you're trying to sit down option routes, certain guys are going to run it one way and other guys are going to run it another. You saw Dak miss that ball in there. Did it make a difference in the football game? No, because it was out of control by then. So you have to hope as a Cowboy fan that they can get Ferguson back out there, because that is another viable option that a defense has to work on when you have a true 12 personnel and two guys who can threaten the deep middle, and be able to hold up at the end of the line of scrimmage. And I think that's what you saw New Orleans do today. I mean, obviously they picked up Foster Moreau, and they were physical at tight end. They were physical with Taysom Hill and what he was doing. And I mean, the bottom line is New Orleans came in here and punched you right in the mouth. And that at the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, and we're so early in the season, we don't know if we're talking about maybe New Orleans. Who knows? Maybe they'll go on and be one of the better teams in the NFL. We didn't really think that, and yet they certainly look like it, played with it, have all sorts of weapons, and this was a scary day for the Cowboys. And the only silver lining stretch is you'd rather have something like this happen early in the season than late in the season, and so maybe they've gotten this one out of the way, because honestly, this one reminded you too much of what they saw with Green Bay. And you brought up, Kyle Shanahan. I thought it was interesting. Micah Parsons, after the game, we were over there visiting with him, and that's what he was talking about. He's like, man, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, he was pretty enamored with the fact that they were able to scheme up the Cowboys like they were. And players want answers, especially great players. They want answers, and they didn't have any answers today to what New Orleans. So, as you would say, Stretch, sometimes you tip your cap, you move on, and then you see if you can kind of gather yourself and come back next week. And you're going to encounter a desperate Baltimore team with some great runners on that team, and a great running quarterback, and we'll see how they perform. Sir, I appreciate it. We'll follow you on WFAA. Stretch can be seen on Joe Trahan's Sports Special at 10:30 on Sunday nights. He can also be seen on the Monday that noon show that they do, and then of course his work on ESPN Central Texas. Stretch, I appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, thank you. The one thing I'll leave by saying is I do believe that the personnel department is going to be a little challenged here, because you're gonna don't be surprised to see the Cowboys start looking, and they're hard to find, and I don't know where you'd get any cap space or any money, but they are in need of one or two defensive tackles, and I just don't know how that's going to work. And I think the unfortunate side to this is, Sam Williams went down. He was a defensive end, but that hurt the Cowboys. And so I think personnel wise, they're going to have to really, really, really be challenged to turn the bottom end of this roster and see if they can get some more physical guys in here.
You make a good point, because Quinn took some of their players with him, and while those might not have been like star players, they were important players, and they were important to the depth, and that may have been a story we should have even paid more attention, as they had to go get Joseph, as they had to get Phillips, as they had to, these are like 10 to 12-year vets that they're trying to bring in at the end of their careers to fortify this defense. And right now, it's not looking great. Stretch, have a good performance tonight on TV, and we thought you looked good on the podcast this evening.
Mosley, have yourself a great day. See you later.
An angry,
scathing rebuke.
scathing, and this
Usually
is
you don't hear that kind of language unless Trump's in court from the judge.
Let's leave him alone. He's had another rough
Sorry,
day
they took
today.
another shot at him.
Yeah, that's rough. It is the Doomsday Podcast, and the Cowboys. Great news: the Ravens come in. That's
The
exciting.
0-2 Ravens. They lost to the Raiders.
Oh my goodness!
Speaking of Dennis Allen, another team that Dennis Allen coached. Yeah, I mean,
a desperate Ravens.
Well, and if you're having trouble
team
playing the run, the last thing you want is the most physically intimidating runner in football, Derrick Henry, coming in here after he wanted to play here and you decided you weren't going to spend money on a running back this year. And you bring back Ezekiel Elliott and don't even call Derrick Henry, who wanted to be here. And, the guy handling the ball is Lamar Jackson, who's the best running quarterback in the history of football. I think he had 94 yards in 2020 against Dallas. That was that infamous Mike Nolan defense. But yeah, I mean, that's their next challenge, I think, is to make these fixes in their run defense and hope that they can handle two very challenging runners in this next game.
I found myself in that first half yearning for the Mike Nolan days. I thought I'd get him back in here and see how he can do. So just so I have this straight, Dak and CD now. CD did have that 65-yard touchdown that briefly kind of got the fans stirred up here. They will, moving forward, make somewhere in the neighborhood of $95 million a year. That's good. That's good. And Ed, I think there is something a little bit galling and embarrassing for a fan base when in your home stadium, Cowboys, at least in the regular season, have been really good in when the "Who Dat" chant is as loud as it is because of our proximity to New Orleans, and I guess they have a pretty good fan base. Certainly, they have a rabid fan base in that part of the country.
Yeah.
But they did invade AT&T Stadium, and as Cowboys fans made their way home early, and I think that was a great decision. I wanted to as well. But the "Who Dat" chants were ringing out.
I heard it. I thought I was in the Superdome for a minute or two.
That's what it said. By the way, did you? You've over the years known the New Orleans group pretty well. Were you able to visit with anybody
I did.
while they were in town?
I talked to Mickey Loomis, who's the general manager. Talked to him in the press box. I spoke to Jeff Ireland, who was also in Dallas with Bill Parcells in the front office personnel department. Went with him to Miami as a general manager, and then obviously went to New Orleans and has been there quite some time since. I don't think they really saw this coming either against a team as good as Dallas. I mean, I think this will change. This is going to change the view, I think, publicly of both franchises and what they're capable of. I think the Saints won a lot of credibility today with what they did to the Cowboys, given, what they've accomplished in recent years as far as being, a perennial division contender, playoff contender. But man, this looked an awful lot like some of the embarrassing playoff losses that they've had. And like I said at the start, the problem for them is it's the same scheme, and in a few weeks they're going to play San Francisco. And maybe San Francisco won't have Christian McCaffrey, but that didn't look like it really matters.
No. And Dennis Allen went to school at LD Bell, about 15, 20 minutes away from where we are right now. So had to feel great for him to come home and put on that kind of offensive show. I mean, if anything, Ed, I think if this turns into a slow march toward the end of the McCarthy era, you at least get to take a look at potential head coaches. Clint Kubiak, I'd hire him on the spot. I'd have him in here tomorrow.
In the second quarter about where does the line start to interview Clint Kubiak for head coaching jobs?
Right here. It started today.
That Belichick guy, he's still out there. He's making himself very known.
Yeah.
He's having a high-profile presence while he's not coaching for the first time in forever.
That took 1 week of NFL for the headline to be Belichick says he's ready to come back.
And he's been praising the Cowboys. He's been praising Dak Prescott as one of the elite quarterbacks in football.
Yeah.
I saw he praised him the other day for when you have a CeeDee Lamb, as you were saying, and you have Dak Prescott, and you're allocating so much to them financially, you got to be able to hit on Aubrey and Overshawn and Turpin and guys like that who are, and in your draft, you've got to have success in the draft and kind of letting everybody know he thinks highly of the job that's been done here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you brought up the Ravens being 0-2 because like they'll find a way to right the ship. It's funny about the Cowboys, like based on their regular season results over the past 3 seasons, the previous 3 seasons, you should think they'll bounce back and be okay. Yet I think Cowboys fans, after seeing that, aren't having that thought like, oh, it's just one game. I mean, like to look that helpless on what you thought was one of the best parts of your team, which is your defense, and to really not be able, and then have your star defensive player basically talking about how great these schemes are, the Shanahan tree.
And he was basically saying it's relatively new, and defensive coordinators haven't caught up to it yet, but it's really not new. I mean, this whole thing started with Mike Shanahan, who's been retired after winning Super Bowls in Denver and San Francisco. San Francisco's the offensive coordinator, won 2 with John Elway in Denver. I mean, he's run this scheme for that long. This is not a new scheme. All the pre-snap motion. I mean, the Saints were ranked in the bottom 3 in terms of using motion until they went to this scheme, and now they're in the top end. They're one of the top 2 or 3 teams in using pre-snap motion and disguise, and obviously it just completely bewildered the Cowboys. And if you like, I think if you can't beat San Francisco and you can't beat Green Bay, and New Orleans created that question for the Cowboys today, then what's the point of the whole season?
Yeah, I mean, but we are going to continue.
Are we committed
to
this on a weekly
doomsday
basis?
Let's see how the Ravens game goes, and then we'll continue on. We are thankful, we're grateful to the Nation family. Got to see them in the suite today, and we love doing the games up here. And Ed, now we're firing away after the game, questioning this this team and talking to everybody. And again, Dak's mentality, I think, echoing the head coach. Hey, not the end of the world. We're going to bounce back and everything. But that was an embarrassing performance, and we'll see where the Cowboys go from here. But wow, to do that. And if you go 1-2, if you get to 1-2, you really start to ask some questions about this team. And then we'll start calling for, like we did a few years ago, the trade, the in-season trade. You got to go get a running back. You got to go, yeah. Well, you got to give up a first-round pick.
You mentioned the record. So dating back to 1990, teams that started 2-0 made the playoffs 64% of the time. 64% of the time, if you start 2-0. If you start 1-1, as the Cowboys have, only 42% of the time.
Okay,
that's a considerable difference.
That, I mean, yes, that is. And if you start 1-2, let me see. Do you have those?
I don't have that. I gave you what I had.
Give me more.
You know what? Here's my next stat. I'm going to look up, and if I had any more time at all,
next gen stats.
If I had any time. No,
I can
my stats.
Oh, Ed stats.
I would have looked up, because you raised the question about how they'll bounce back. Well, how many times have they lost 2 in a row or more with Dak as their quarterback? Not very often, I would say.
The Dak bounce back.
Correct.
If I'm just spitballing it, how many years is this for Dak? How many years?
9th.
He's only lost consecutive games 2 times in his entire career.
I would say 2 or 3. I think that's a good guess. But at the same time, they also are the best home team in football since 2022. They've scored the most points at 35 points a game at home in that time span, and they've allowed an average of 15. So what happened today doesn't fit any of those metrics.
No, and Jerry did say that he didn't think this was the Cowboys. He didn't think they looked like themselves. And he also said, like the one he was doing today. Well, he got out there quickly today, didn't he? I mean, he was Johnny on the He was Johnny on here. It is the Doomsday Podcast, and we will be gathered next Saturday and
I don't know who has the game next week. I don't know if it's a Fox game.
I think it might be Tom. Tom may just go every week. Ed and I were in the week. Ed and I
Did from what I read.
did
Yeah,
better.
people said he
and
was
seemed a
more
little
critical and
comfortable.
honest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the Doomsday Podcast. It is the most popular Cowboys podcast in the industry.
Is it?
And industry.
Is it?
And we will be back with you next Sunday for Ed Werder and the Rogue Media Sports Network. I am Matt Mosley. Good night, everybody.
We are Rogue Media Sports.